And now, Working Man Radio with your host, Joe Lyles.
I'll tell you a story about something that happened 100 years ago. 100 years ago this year. I don't know the dates because I'm off the top of my head right now. I probably might have looked this up, but a lot of times I think of things on the fly and don't have good time to go run down the all the particulars. But you know what? You'll recognize this event: the Ludlow Massacre occurred in Colorado in 1913. It was it flew out of a coal miners' strike. There were coal mines in Colorado, and there were coal miners in Colorado, and they did not like their wages, hours, and working conditions, so they did a natural thing. This is you want to talk about a natural force? You put your foot on somebody's neck and extract labor from him without sufficient compensation, be he a slave, whatever kind of slave he is, if he's a property slave or if he's a wage slave, he is going to, you can predict it. It's predictable as the weather. It is as predictable as the onslaught of a hurricane. You put your neck on your foot on working people's necks, and they will do something about it. They will flee. In the case of property slaves, that was a big problem before the Civil War in the South. It wasn't a problem. It was a problem for the white folks who owned the slaves. Slaves had this peculiar habit of wanting to run away. Imagine that. How's that for a natural force? It is natural for people to resent being exploited and oppressed and enslaved. This is natural for them to dislike that. Imagine that. You know, there are people who don't understand that. They don't understand that. There are people today. There are people who will watch my podcast. You can go around and there is something. There's a YouTube phenomenon, right? Of really the filthy little bigots that write the nastiest stuff you can imagine. The Cheerios ran this commercial with a white woman and a black husband and their mixed race daughter. And, attractive people, because people in TV commercials are attractive. They don't put ugly people on TV commercials. An attractive couple, an attractive mixed race couple. There are many of them. And you should see the bile that was spewed in the comments section. They had to close their comments down because the comments were so ugly. Those people that wrote those comments, they think that there was this guy. What was a fella back in? Somebody made a reference to slavery. Somebody made a reference to apologizing for slavery. And another fellow said, "Well, apologize for what? He provided them with food and a roof over their head, like the slave owner was generous. Well, I'll feed you and clothe you and house you, but you have to work in my cotton fields all in the hot sun all day, and you're not allowed to leave and go find a better job." What a guy! You know, there are people who believe that. They don't understand the natural tendency of human beings to resent being oppressed, exploited, and enslaved. They don't get that. Well, in Ludlow, Colorado, the coal miners there, mostly white folks, got tired of being exploited, oppressed, and enslaved. So they went on strike. And the coal mines in question were owned by a company that was controlled, I will say owned, I expect there were many stockholders, but one of the principal stockholders was none other than John D. Rockefeller Jr. John D. Rockefeller Sr. was alive, very much alive, but he had retired and pretty much handed everything over to his son, John D. Rockefeller Jr. And John D. Rockefeller Jr. didn't want to pay these. He felt that he had the God-given right to cheap labor to mine his coal. I can't be expected to pay these people any kind of decent wage. Capitalism doesn't provide enough for me to provide for my needs in my palace on the Hudson River, and also provide for the needs of the people who are mining the coal that I sell. I couldn't possibly be expected to furnish these people with a living. Who do they think they are? So he got on the phone to the governor of Colorado. Who elected the governor of Colorado? Who elected the governor of Colorado in 1913? Who elected the current governor of Colorado? The people of Colorado? Who did the governor of Colorado work for? Did he work for the people of Colorado, or did he work for John D. Rockefeller Jr.? John D. Rockefeller Jr. gets on the phone and says, Governor, I need you to do something about my property. I need you to protect my property from that rabble out there that expects me to pay them a decent living wage. How dare they? It's an outrage, I tell you. I need you to protect my rights. So the governor of Colorado obliged John D. Rockefeller Jr. and sent the Colorado National Guard, who opened fire and killed miners. They killed people. They killed the citizens and residents of the state of Colorado. The governor of Colorado was not working for the people of Colorado. He was working for John D. Rockefeller Jr. He believed in keeping with the theory of what a legitimate function of government is. In keeping with that prevailing theory in 1913, he protected property rights, because that's what government's for. It's to protect property rights and contract rights and nothing else. Government exists to protect the interests of the haves and no other interests. They're the only ones who have any rights. They're the only ones who have any interests. They're the only ones the government should listen to. But here's a question for you, because contained within this story is the contradiction. How is it that John D. Rockefeller Jr. can sit in his house on the Hudson River and own property in Colorado? How is it that he can sit in his house on the Hudson River and have property rights on and have coal that belongs to him taken out of the ground by working people, loaded onto trains and sent to wherever he sold the coal? How is he able to do that? Can he do that himself? Can employees of Standard Oil or whatever company it was that owned the coal mines, can those employees create this ownership? How are his rights enforced? And you know what the answer is? The state. The police state, the cops, and the National Guard if necessary. The apparatus of the government. The government of Colorado existed and was able to enforce the property rights of a guy who lives on the other side of the country and put his interests ahead of anybody else's. This is where the interstate commerce in coal dug out of the ground in Colorado, put on railroads, all of which is protected by government. Government created the national market for coal. Government created John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s fortune. John D. Rockefeller doesn't want government doing anything for anybody else. Don't forget, like this podcast, subscribe to this podcast, and comment. Do you disagree with me? Leave a comment. I will respond. I love people to disagree. We'll be right back.
You've been listening to Working Man Radio with Joe Lyle at joelylesradio.com.